Listen up!
Hvis I gerne vil fægte, så kan I så ikke gå lidt væk, sådan at vi
There's
kan
a
høre,
wind
hvad vi-
going, and there's a lot of people, so my general speaking direction will be in this direction. So if you don't want to miss anything, make sure that you join the audience in this semicircle. But if there are any questions afterwards, no problem. If there's something that you didn't get, just come talk to us. That's the reason why we put this demo at this time of day, because afterwards we can relax, have a beer and chat swords. I'm notorious for never stopping to talk about swords, so feel free to ask me anything regarding combat. Okay, a few words about what I do and who I am. So I come from this very community. I started out with reenactment 30 years ago, so my earliest friends were like Christopher Cold or Olben Depper, so I come from this generation of reenactors. And then I love the wild fun that you are still enjoying on the field these days. I very much enjoyed that, but at one point I was asking myself questions about how it was back in the day. How did they actually fight? And I started looking at actual weapons and noticed the differences between my blunt reenactment weapons, and also I was asking, so how were the shields constructed and how much would such a shield actually take? And that's how it all started. So I got interested in actual martial arts, and so I made a huge detour doing traditional martial arts, and I did many decades, and I still do it, historical European swordsmanship with a focus on sword and shield. So I'm also well known for working with sword and buckler, like Mikkel is too, and so we also have done a lot of stuff with that. And the difference regarding 14th century sword and buckler fencing and Viking Age fencing is, from a research point of view, we don't have any written accounts how they did it back in the day. For 14th century, yes, we do, even though there are problems with these sources too. For the Viking Age, we don't. Okay, so I'm the first to admit that we don't know how they did it. All we can do is use research and academic and practical instruments to make a most educated guess, as you will. Okay, so and we're going to share some of our insights with you tonight, because one thing that is very enlightening is when you actually use sharp weapons. I bet a lot of you have probably done some test cutting, so if you have, then you have probably also realized how easy it is to cut through a test target. I cut various test targets, and if you for instance, like we did at Trelleborg in autumn, cut half a dead pig or a dead pig, then it's quite impressive what these weapons do. Like Niels was using one of the sharp spears. I also brought sharp spears, but more about that later. And with the sharp spear, he just went in and out as if there was no resistance at all. And interestingly, dead tissue is harder to cut than living tissue. So how do I know? A friend of mine is a surgeon, and he said, well, we learned to open up bodies with corpses, of course, but he says living tissue just is much more easy. It's much easier to cut. Just an interesting aside. Okay, so when we fence, when we are out on the field, then we have interactions between our weapons, and our weapons are blunt, so they react like blunts. But how do sharp weapons interact? And before I'm going to go into some of our interesting insights in detail, we want to give you an impression of how we work with sharp weapons. Yeah, it may sound totally spooky and freaky, so I think we just give you an idea, and then later on feel free to ask questions. But first we make a demo, then I'm going to do some more explanations, and then we see how it goes and proceed. Given that we are still in one piece, and the fencers will be my friend Mikkel from Ask, and Jacob, who is a great swordsman who I only met this year, last year was it, in autumn, right?
This year.
Was it this year only? Oh god! But he's a gorgeous fencer. So and just so, because oftentimes when people read about they're fencing with sharp swords, they must be mad. It's difficult to explain, but I'm just going to tell you this little anecdote of my student Karen, who picked up sword and buckler many years ago, and she stuck with me as a student for a couple of years. When she was like in her 3rd or 4th year of training, during a training session when we were fencing with sharp swords, and I said, okay, now we're going to put on some gear, take out the blunt swords and do it with mass. She said like, I just don't like fencing with protection and blunts. It's just not safe enough. The sharp weapons, that's what she considered really safe, because that's when everybody is spot on, totally focused, and you get the best feedback through your weapon. Okay, so much for the talk. Anything you want to add, Mikkel?
Not just yet.
Okay, good then. I put the chest to the side. So I've got 2 sharp swords here. Can you take one? I think you always take one. Okay, so maybe if Mikkel and Jacob just go around and just hold the point up, and just so that people get an idea. So these are Paul Bin's swords, which I got maybe 20 years ago, and I asked him to make them sharp. But the one thing that I altered recently is the shape of the hilt. So this is a replica of a sword that was found in Mecklenburg. So it's now at Moscow Museum, and you see that the grip is super short, right? And that's for a reason, because the ergonomics work best if you actually use the pommel to steer the sword, and to that end you really need a very short grip. And so, because that's what the original swords are like, and because we came to the inside, that's a great design. That's why I changed the fittings on these swords too. So now they have fittings and short grips of proper proportions. Okay, so this is not a museum replica, it's just modern steel like your Paul Bin sword if you have one, but it is sharp. Do you guys want to start?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Like 3 passes and then we change?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to, they're going to salute, then they're going to do 3 fights, and then they salute again, then I come in and we fight until everybody has fought everyone 3 times. Good.
So I stop it way out, because Jacob is semi-exposed and my blade can fit in the opening. So I just make the move as if to strike, but I just stop it way out, to make sure that I suddenly see a hit, and then we just acknowledge it. And if it seemed like it was not a hit, we'll just take the discussion whether or not, but it's mostly the other way around. Someone, the one being hit, thinks, oh, that was a hit, and then the one hitting is saying, no, because I was doing this action, I was doing a control move rather than a finishing blow. So then you'll just, no, that was not a hit because I was not ready to strike.
Yeah, so when you fence with chops, there's this present danger, and you, like a simple example is, I have these clamps on my shield edge, so in blunt fencing, sometimes I over commit and I expose my hand, and I realize that because I cut my fingers on the clamps. And that never, ever, ever happens when I fence with sharp swords, because then you just don't expose, you don't even think about it. You have this, your body is aware that there's a clear and present danger, and that's why usually in this kind of experimental fighting, you know when you are exposed, and so you know when you could be hit, because your brain just works like that. And that's why when we have discussions, it's usually the other way around than in sports. You say, oh, you got me, and maybe then Mikkel said, no, I wasn't ready, or whatever. Okay, 2 more fights. Shot?
Yes.
Yeah, so that was a cut to the lower leg.
With the back edge, like so, to the inside of the knee, cutting the tendon. Var du inde? Jeg tror. Okay. Jeg var nede her. Ja. So that was either a thrust to the gut or to the legs, because I had raised my shield too high and I didn't realize that he was close enough to do a thrust. But it's so difficult for me to see whether he could reach me or not, because I cannot see his hand. So I don't know how much he has, how much reserve. Because you just go like this is a thrust, and he can obviously thrust all the way to here, but that's not so good.
Yeah, that was true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously this is no good as a sport, right? So you see the major difference here is that we are interested in learning a particular skill or learning an art and making sure that you defend yourself and control the weapons. Control is the most important part, not least because of course we don't want to kill each other. The cool thing is that this ties in with actual fighting, because control, as it seems looking at the historical manuals, seems to be the most important part. The actual kill is the icing on the cake.
Leg shot.
Yeah, I had to slow down, which from the outside, if you would film it, it would look like I couldn't actually get him. But as I saw the leg being exposed, I started the motion. I realized I do have the tempo, I have the time to actually hit, because the hit would be like this. You just throw the weapon forward. Of course, you can't do that.
Yeah, and I only withdrew my leg when I could read Roland's shoulder. So when Roland's shoulder did a roll, that's when I withdrew my leg, because that's when...
Okay, so there was a response.
There was a response, but it was way too late.
Okay. You got me?
I think so.
Okay, I didn't see it.
Because it is a slow-mo move.
Oh, okay, cool.
Underneath.
That was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did you have the meat?
Yeah,
Good.
I was here.
That's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, actually, we can pass them around if you want to.
I just want to say one thing, because we did it a lot, especially in our last fight, which is one thing that we don't use much in reenactment fighting, and that is manipulating the shield with the point. Because this point, if you lean it onto the shield, you can move the shield because it bites, which means that I can give him some pressure that he has to respond to, and my sword doesn't move from it as long as I maintain the proper orientation of the point. And that's even with a sword that's a Viking sword that's roundish at the end.
Yeah.
Because what you do is you instead of doing like this, I'm showing it at my hand because that's easier to see. Because this way it would slip, because that's just like cutting with a knife or whatever, it will just move. But if I do this and press the blade slightly, it cuts into it like a chisel. So that means that you can kind of lean it onto the plate and just push it away. So it can be quite powerful actually.
Yeah.
Also pulling with edge.
Let's just to give them an idea, just to show the one technique that you developed where I lift your shield to hook with the cross.
Oh yeah.
Yeah? What do you want to do at me?
Okay.
Okay, so apparently this is something that doesn't work as well with blunts or not at all as with sharp weapons, namely the shield manipulation. Okay, that you can control the shield. And here's an interesting thought for you. We know that the swords, the Sparta type swords, had roundish points. They were not as acute as in later periods, but we do have very acute points on Viking Age spears. Okay, so there must be a reason why they used flattish, roundish points on some weapons, and on others decided it's a better idea to have a very acute point. Just some food for thought. My take on it is that this kind of shield manipulation with the point of the sword works very good because this is round. If it was super acute, if you do the same thing with the spear, as we, if you are up for it, can look at later, then you get stuck much more severely. So it's not so easy to get the weapon out and respond to pressure, while here I can easily get out and put it in a new place if I want to, right? But with a spear that's harder to do because the spear bites deeper into the wood. Okay, now for a particular technique that Mikkel has figured out, which I love and which works so much better with sharp swords. He's going to explain it to you. It also gives an additional, shows you an additional benefit of the shield boss. So, Mikkel?
So this particular shield boss is a Gokstad copy, but also if you look at the Hedeby shield bosses, they have very pronounced neck. I believe the archaeological term is. Yeah, like that one. That's very much like a Hedeby boss.
See this area here. This recess.
And it's good for catching anything actually. But in this particular technique, I use it to catch the
You tell me what I would have to do.
yeah, if you go from here, I use it to catch the upper edge of Roland's shield. So when we are in this...
The upper edge?
No, yeah, the upper edge.
Okay.
No, you want the lift first.
Yeah, I want the lift because
Okay.
it's so spectacular.
Yeah. So then forget about the lower. I use it to catch his lower edge.
Maybe if you just show it and then explain.
Yeah, makes more sense.
Okay, so you're trying to get the high bind and I resisted lift my shield, right?
So
Okay, again from the other side.
that one's pretty cool. Obviously, we have a counter for it as well, but I want to show you the opposite. But that was the one that I tried to start to explain, and I just want to show that too because that's also quite.
If you just can say a word of how you can pin my shield with a sword as you...
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Because we are both trying to get above to gain this opening. So if you look over my shoulder,
So initially we are trying to lean our shield on the opposing shield, making the opponent carry the weight of our shield, thereby exposing his face. So originally Mikkel wanted to do this. Boom. Okay? And I resisted that. I closed that line, so my shield goes up. Also, I try to do the same.
so he has raised the shield, but now he has this exposed area that I can put my sword into. So he actually thinks that I'm still pushing.
Yeah.
And then with my shield, but I lower my shield so I catch its lower edge instead. But I still push here, and then I can simply flip it. But if I was to do that with a totally blunt point,
With a blunt, it's difficult.
it's much more difficult. Yeah, can be done, but it's yeah.
Show where the point rips from the other side too, so everybody sees it.
Oh yeah, I realized that was the backstep. So I go up,
I go up too.
So here, this area is where I push, and to get the lever.
And I don't see it. I feel resistance, so I keep my shield where it is.
Also, I maintain the binding force at the bottom, so his shield doesn't just flip, because that's not what I want. So I'm giving him, which means that I can go down with my shield boss and attack him in the low.
Okay, so that's the combination of the sharp point and the specific design of the shield that makes a lot of sense as soon as you use the actual weapons, the actual tools. Much more difficult to do with blunt. I try to pull off that technique in blunt fencing very often. Most of the time it gets me killed. But I love it so much, so sometimes I force it, and whenever you try to force a technique, usually it doesn't work. But as soon as we tried it out with sharps, we realized, oh wow, that's super powerful. Okay? So you want to show one more application of the shield, so one more technique before we proceed.
It's more or less the same thing, except that now I'm manipulating the lower half, and then I catch the top part. But instead of flipping, so Roland can attack me above, I simply strike from up here, like so.
Yeah, so he opens me up.
He's open, but I'm quite covered behind my shield, and I can strike from up here and go quite deep with my cut.
Okay, so these are really cool applications of the shield, and you notice that we don't see each other much when we fence, right? I hardly see anything of him at all. I see the legs, but I don't see the fighter. I see the weapons occasionally, but this element of remaining in contact, both with the shield, as well as with the weapons is crucial, because that gives me an idea of where he's moving and where he is. Okay, in later German medieval Fechtbuch literature, it's called fühlen, feeling, sensing through the blade. And again, sensing with a sharp weapon is way more instructive and powerful than with a blunt. Right? If two sharps interact, then they bite into each other. Okay? Then there's no sliding. Okay? One volunteer who wants to feel that sensation of a sharp edge against a sharp edge?
Sure.
A young one? Yeah. Come in. Okay. So what you what you are going to do is give me your left hand first. So this is what you're going to do. Keep it here. So we're going to come here to the center. We're going to establish just a bind, a crossing of swords, where both of us try to, that we don't use excessive force, but also it's a bit like pushing open a door. So when you open a door that you have never entered, a room you have never entered, you give it the usual pressure that is required to open a door, and if you need more power, then you press a little more. If it still doesn't work, you go through the window. Okay, so that's basically fencing. And so we're going to, this is the edge, this is my edge, and your edge goes towards me, not against the blade, and likewise. And you want to just gently test without pressing, because press a little more. This is not supposed to happen, right? Because you don't want to be so hard in the blade that if my resistance goes away, you drop into a void. It's just pressing like this. Okay? Just a little sensing, and remember, the point is higher than your head, very important, and the edge is towards me. And we start very gently. Stop. Cover yourself. You don't have a shield now, so cover yourself from one side to the other. I do the same. This is higher than the head. The edge is towards me, and as soon as there's contact, you give a little pressure. Do you notice how it grips? There's no sliding. And you can move, you can actually pull my sword towards you if you want to, right? Likewise, I can do the same. And if I want to get away, I have to unnotch the swords to slide, right? Okay, so this is additional skills that you develop when you actually work with sharp weapons. What's your name? Mike? Pleasure. Yeah. So what did it feel like? Yeah. Okay. And in comparison to blunt swords? Yeah. And did you feel that there was this grip? Yeah, exactly. Can you say that aloud, because that's the important part?
Sorry, you could feel exactly where you were and where the blade was going to go and what was coming against you.
Exactly, and this is something that the sword can do for you. Thank you very much. This is something, and this is the essential truth of the sword. It tells you where the other implement that it bit into goes to and how much pressure there is. There is no other weapon that gives you this kind of information. Yeah? There are other bladed weapons, but because the leverage, because they tend to be shorter, or because they are mounted to welded to an X head, they don't give you the same kind of information. That's possibly the reason why around 1400 a professional swordsman wrote a poem, in Italian, of course he would write a poem, which is called I Am the Sword. And in that poem it says, I am the sword, look at me at a cross. Daggers, lances, axes are worthless against me. Come and feel the pain. And so when I entered reenactment, I was told the spear is the Gatling gun of the Viking Age. So these are two conflicting truths, right? And so I was wondering, what are we missing in regards to spear versus sword? And so a long time ago, probably like 5 years ago, Mikkel and I made an ultimate test there's one late medieval miniature showing sword and buckler man versus a two-handed spearman. Yeah, so it was something that was at least depicted, and so we made a test, and we're going to share with you the insights. I'm first going to use a blunt sword versus Mikkel's two-handed spear. Okay.
I can get mine.
So Mikkel is just getting a blunt two-handed spear, because I only bought sharp ones, because this demo is more about the interaction of the wood of the pole and the sword. This is a blunt sword here. I doubt it would pass any of your safety tests because it's
Too pointy.
too pointy and the edges are relatively fine, but it actually handles like an original one. That's why I use it for fencing. Okay, so you're all familiar with spear hunting. The difference here is that there is no target areas, and we're not going to go through complete fights or anything, but you will soon see my dilemma. That was already a shot. That was a shot. That was a shot. Okay, so yes, indeed, the spear is a powerful weapon. But then why did Fiore de Liberi say that the spear is worthless against the sword? Is it only because they had longer swords, or because it's the late Middle Ages, or are we missing something? Remember the thumb of your healing hand. Was that it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so you saw that I fared much better with a sharp sword, and the reason why is because when you use, can you pass me my blunt? When you use a blunt on a wooden pole, can you just stand it? So in spear fencing, you are taught that you have to control the spear and get in as quickly as possible so you get in killing range. Of course, the person with a long weapon tries to retreat because he has got multiple ranges, and he also has one range which is so much longer than my sword. Now the problem with controlling this shaft is that I constantly have to look where he's going, because he simply rotates out of every bind. Once again over here. So with a blunt sword, I have to look for the weapon to see whether or not I have bound, particularly where it moves. This compares to riding a motorcycle and looking down at the street in front of you. Okay? You are unlikely to ever reach your destination. When I use a sharp sword, I can keep track of, look at the target, look at him, because the sword gives me all the information I need. And you see, it's not easy for him to simply rotate out of the bind. It's not like I cut off his shaft, but I can feel where it is. As soon as I have contact, I realize through sensing where he's moving. That's why I can keep my eyes on the target, which is him, which is a kind of information you only get from the sword. He cannot actively establish this information with a wooden shaft of a spear.
You can think of it like this. That certainly helps me. If you think of how many of you may not be old enough for this, but how a record player works. So the pickup goes up and down because there are bumps in the groove, and that's the information you get with a blunt. So the blunt moves this way to tell you that the spear is moving, which is sort of a derived information. And that means that you have to look in order to get the interpretation, because you get too little information, because the only information you get is that the spear is moving, not which way it's going. Whereas with the sharp, that you probably saw it, but if
You can actually try this out with your own sharp
Oh, yeah.
knife.
Yeah, you
Just
can-
put
this
the
is so small, so it's,
yeah, it's small, but you can feel, use the blunt. So when you want to try it out yourself, take your knife, bind with the backside of your knife.
Yeah.
Yeah, use the back of the knife, and then bind with the actual blade, and then that tells you everything you need to know.
yeah. So rather than getting the up and down information, you get the back and forth information. So the back and forth information is of a higher quality, which means that through your hand and arm, your brain instantly knows which direction the spear is going, which is obviously much better when you're hunting a spear, because you can tell whether it's being withdrawn or thrust. Because obviously when it's thrusting, you need to cover any eventual opening, and if it's being withdrawn, you need to pursue, right?
So and this means we are back to what they called fühlen, sensing. So the sword has the cool quality of providing you with the sensory information, and the body acts on sensory tactile information much faster than on visual information. Okay, so finally with our little demo, there's a third part that I thought about, but that requires some of you if you want to join me. Now, all of this has been single combat that you have been looking at. And now that you see how we work with these sharp weapons, but also how we draw our conclusions, it's pretty obvious that it's difficult to do this with more people in a group, and in particular, if we have to use sharp spears. Because apparently, what we do in reenactment fencing, or you do in reenactment fencing, because I don't do it anymore. In reenactment fencing, when you stab a shield, then it's often so pokey, just to draw attention or to irritate something or whatever. Now with sharp weapons, that's a different beast. So here's the one thing I honestly asked myself. While now I know you can acquire the skill to go into a sword fight, and it's not folly. You go into a fight with sharp weapons and you are convinced you can prevail because you believe in your skill. It's the skill that made your trainers survive fights, and so you know you can do it. And I can understand that, because if I had to fight with sharp weapons, with a sword and a shield, and there was no way out, I would do it because it's not gambling. I would believe if I do everything correctly and if I don't make a mistake, I will survive. What does it take to develop this kind of mindset? Which skills do you have to train as a formation to move out against people who put something like that into your face. Okay, so what does it take? This is something that I really want to find out, because I don't think they went out there gambling. They knew they had a chance to prevail and to survive this. So this is going to be what we're going to do the next 20 years. We're going to look into formation fighting, which is going to be super difficult and will never ever end up in some kind of sport, because it's just impossible to simulate the interaction of weapons. But so we don't call what we do when we fence with blunt swords, we don't actually call it sports or anything, it's just practice. If any of you get interested in that, and because I mean I basically come from your background, I asked myself questions and they 30 years later put me here. But if you want to join us for the next part of the story to find out how to actually fight with spears, information, you're most welcome. I have various events at least 2 or 3 times per year, and if you're just curious, you're always welcome to come. Okay, so finally, in the same vein, we've got 2 sharp spears here. If there are any of you fighters who just want to take the occasion to find out what it feels to stand next to each other with your shields out, and there are shields actually making contact with your spears making contact with your shield, just to get the impression what it's like when sharp spears are pointing at you and you have to hold the spear in a position where you are covered. If there are any such volunteers, then Mikkel and I would be too happy to just do it very cautiously. You wouldn't be the first ones. And if you want to earn yourself a mark of a sharp spear on your shield to show around for the rest of the season, then this is the chance. So we're going to wait for a minute, and if anybody wants to get a shield, to get his mark.
Vi begynder at have lidt lav batteri. Hvad så? Under 20. Men så er det, vi kan.
You're going to line up here with the back to the fence.
It's okay, it's okay. It's freestyle.
We are going to discuss Okay, relax. We're going also, I'm just waiting for... Okay, some safety advices to begin with. When you are... Can you hold this for a second? Absolutely. Can you give me a flip? So don't raise your hand against the shield, because you will note very quickly that it's a good idea to not hold the shield close to the body. Okay? Because we don't know the makeup of your shields. We will be very gentle and start pressing. We're not going to try to just move up a little bit so we have a huge line. Maybe you want to move out of the way a little bit, thank you. So don't brace your hand against your shield, that's not a good idea. We found out that it makes sense to hold the shield out a bit, yeah, because it then covers a greater area. If it's very close to you, that's not a good idea. Never ever look over the top of your shield, okay? That's not good. Not when you are in reach. When you're out of reach, that's okay, but we are now simulating that you are in reach of spears, all right? So what is a good shield position? I think something like that. Don't go square on, maybe at a slight angle. That's probably a good idea. And then next, after that experience, we can discuss what kind of formation would result from that. But at first, if you just move up one more step over here so we have enough space. Okay. No, that's okay. I think you can stand up there. Come over here, gentlemen. So, anything you want to say, Mikkel?
Yeah, about not bracing the shield. I was the one wielding the spear the last time in Hedeby, and I can tell you that we did it on historical reconstruction shields, so they were made the way we think they made them. But as a spearman, I could tell that if someone was bracing the shield with the body, you could just stab them in the body through the shield, no problem. So you would definitely not do that because it feels like it's not a problem at all to just go right through the shield.
Okay, so what we are going to do, I'm going to demonstrate with a blunt size at first. Don't look at me because that's not a good idea. Look at me again.
Just start halfway.
Okay, this would be the first thing I do when I'm in range. Okay, so when you are in range, it's not a good idea to expose the face. So the shield will be out. And then I will give you some pressure with so you just feel it, and I'm going to press somewhere else. I'm also going to point the spear at exposed areas. This is below the shield now. This is so you get the dick-shriveling feeling of a sharp point pointing at the exposed area. Okay, so Mikkel's going to start at that end.
Halfway or? Okay. Just so we don't bump.
Oh yeah, okay. You're
We
right.
go like that, right?
Yeah, okay. Who are you starting with?
Honest, I guess.
Yeah, okay.
So no, wait. 1, 2.
The hardest part will be, because you want to look good in front of the audience, to keep the shield out there. Yeah, this is going to strain your shoulder. Yeah, okay. So we're going to, so I have
7.
7, okay. So let's do 3 and then, let's do 4 and then relax and then continue. Just so they don't look crap when the shield goes down.
Oh.
Okay? Yeah. So we're going to do the first side. So,
Next.
That's my 4.
Yeah, me too.
Relax.
Det er fedt. Det er fucking fedt.
You probably noticed, everyone, that it's a good idea to have a 90 centimeter shield. Yeah. So anything smaller than 80 is really
And we're using almost no power at all. Yeah. So we're just putting the point on it and gently moving them away.
Also, I think it was with you. You noticed that the shield flipped, and I had to stop the spear because else it would have straight into the face, right? Okay, so let's continue. So you're next, and then you already had your share, yeah? All the guys who have already been tested, you still take formation, so it looks cool. Okay.
Straight up fucking good.
Big applause for our shield. So yeah, I guess I'm going to talk to you guys over a beer when we have ended this, because I'm really curious what your first impressions were, and it's cool that we have something to talk about at the fire now.
Yeah, they are done, right?
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much. You're dismissed.
I think we should just show, just for fun, if you take my shield, and I'll just try and poke it a bit more.
Should I be afraid now?
No. It's just to show you that if I just use a little more, instead of just putting the shield on and pushing, then I'm going to go for this area out here.
Yeah.
So if I just use a little bit more force, but no, speed rather. That turns into force, obviously, but hitting it at speed, then this is this. It already made quite a mark there. So if I just use a little bit more. And he's not bracing it. He's not bracing it at all. So
I can see it.
Yeah. So if he's holding it out like that, I don't want to do that. But if he's bracing it, it's resisting. So the reason why I don't pass any more through that is because it just flops off. But if it's resting against his shoulder, it's not flopping anywhere. So yeah. So that's pretty cool. And I can tell you that using it feels a little bit perilous, not only to be the ones at the receiving end, but also wielding this weapon because it's quite a weapon.
Thanks for not killing me. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. We have our... Yeah.
One question.
Yeah.
In that case, in that scenario, when you connect with your spear, kind of close to the edge, can you like turn it
I mean,
out of the
that's
hand?
what I slowly did. When he's stuck,
I mean, the spear can turn your shield.
I think I have a better lever.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have the time. So, because if I do that,
Yeah, exactly.
well, information, yes, but in single combat, no, I don't think so. I mean, I could be wrong, but the thing is, if I spin his shield, I am still in his shield, and he has a sword. So that's still a really bad idea.
So maybe that's something that information makes sense if you have like two-handed spears who want to open up the opponent. But the point I wanted to make with this little demo, which is like the very, 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 very start of looking into formation fighting, is being in range of the spears without control gets you killed. So I am convinced that the formation fighting, and that's just a very early assumption, yeah, so maybe I changed my mind, but I'm convinced that in formation fighting you need the same kind of control before you go into hitting range that we use with sword and shield. In sword and shield fighting, all the time we fight at a distance where you can gain control but you cannot be hit. So once you have control, then you have to bridge a little more distance to actually hit. So I believe that whatever they did in formation, they would not step into hitting range and then start to fight. They would start the fight out of hitting range to gain control and then do the kill. How exactly our formation has to be trained to do that, I don't know. But that is what we do, that trying to find stuff out. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have questions, you can find me. If you want to look at weapons, they're on the table here. Thank you.